Hello, this is Flare Flare from the Adventures of Shadow Pond and Flare Flare. This is our very first adventure where me and Shadow Pond actually meet. FYI, this never ever happened. This is fantasy. You know that, ponies. So, let's get started, shall we? Gather around, my little ponies. Time for the story of the interactions featuring Shadow Pond and Flare Flare. The story takes place in Ponyville and this story will tell us the story of two ponies that will meet each other and how their friendship started. Our story begins in Ponyville. Flare Flare was one of many ponies that was raised well and learned through many lessons from her parents, having friends was important and always to get to know other ponies and have a good friendship that would last her a lifetime. But sadly, after getting bullied all of her life, she was starting to think she won't have one true friend that she would have forever. Flare Flare woke up from her sleep and looked out her window that and saw the sun shining bright. She closed her blinds to her window as she sighed. Another wonderful day in Ponyville, she said, groaning. Flare Flare went downstairs and sat at the table as her mother served her breakfast. "What's wrong, Flare?" her mother asked as she placed her breakfast onto the plate. "Oh, nothing, Mom. Just another day of me being bullied. The more I live, I'm going to be hated. Guess I won't have that one true friend," Flare Flare said, sighing as she started to eat her breakfast slowly. "Oh, there, Flare Flare. You you were brought up as a wonderful pony, and you were taught the very best in school. You just gotta in a little effort to make new friends, and they will treat you with the utmost respect any other pony should have as a friend," her mother said, nuzzling Flare Flare's cheek. Flare Flare tried to resist as she groaned. After Flare was done with eating and cleaned the table, she went outside and walked through the town with her head down. She walked through the fields and walked to a tree and laid under it, masking her emotions as she buried her head in her hooves. She laid there crying silently for an hour. As Flare Flare was laying there in tears, off in the distance there was an alicorn watching her. She had been watching Flare Flare for a while now. The alicorn walked over to Flare Flare and stood over her as Flare Flare stopped and looked up at her with tears in her eyes. "Now, fair pony, what seems to be the matter with you?" the alicorn said, asking Flare. "Oh, it's nothing. I'll be fine," Flare Flare said, bearing her face back down again. "Now, there must be something the matter with you, as there is tears I saw in those eyes of yours," the alicorn said to Flare Flare. "You want to know the truth why I'm like this?" Flare Flare said to the alicorn, picking her head up as she looked at the alicorn. "Why, of course, but first I would like to know your name, and tell me about yourself, young pony," the alicorn said, laying next to Flare Flare. "Well, my name is Flare Flare, and I was born here in Ponyville. As a young pony, I was taught by my mother how important friendship is and how to protect it with my life. Through school, I learned it the hard way. All my life, I've been bullied, and I have a harder time fitting in than making friends every day. I can't wake up with a good smile for 1 minute. Every day I come here and just cry. If my mom sees me like this, she'll force me to make friends, even though I told her I can make friends on my own. But since me being bullied, I can't have one true friend that have," Flare Flare said, sighing. "Wow, I never heard such a sad story, Flare Flare. Well, my name is Shadowpawn. I was born in Canterlot, but my parents decided to move here to Ponyville and make a living here. My mother a musician and my father a teacher for magic unicorns. When we first moved here, I pretty much had the same experience you're having now. I had problems fitting in and making new friends, and had that one true friend to too, so I think you and I aren't much so different in personalities. We want to fit in and make lots of friends and then have that one true friend that we'll always keep forever in life," Shadowpawn said, smiling to Flare Flare as Flare Flare looked up at her, smiling back. Throughout the day, Flare Flare and Shadowpond talked to each other and got to know each other. They told him funny jokes and humor memories that they had in the past. When they said their goodbyes, Shadow Pawn said to Flare Flare, "Oh, Flare Flare, it was my pleasure for spending my time with you. You can always find me for a talk or a hangout." "Oh, it was my pleasure too, Shadow Pawn, and you do the same, friend," Flare Flare said, rubbing up against Shadow. "Oh, please, call me Shadow. Only my parents call me Shadow Pawn," she said, rubbing back. "I think we're going to be best friends forever," Flare Flare said to Shadow, smiling. "Oh, yes, we will, my dear Flare Flare," Shadow Pawn said, smiling back. And so they went their ways and went home to tell their parents about the day, and their parents smiled and were happy for their child to find that one friend that they were looking for all their life.